Harmon here with Leemon Baird. Welcome to another episode of First Principles. I think this one is going to be a lot of fun. In an earlier episode, we talked about artificial intelligence. And near the end of that episode, I had made the observation to Leemon that it sounded like a lot of what we had talked about were foundational to perhaps colonizing Mars. So, Leemon, Elon Musk, has some really interesting ideas about how we should go about colonizing Mars. Does he have it right or does he have it wrong?
No, what he's described is wrong.
Okay.
My guess is he actually knows the right way to do it, but what he's been saying is not quite what you would want to do. So we could talk about that.
All right, we're going to dig into what's it going to take to colonize Mars, and let's just get started. So, self-replicating machines, robots, are going to be really important for making this happen.
Yeah, you have to have self-replicating machines. The idea that we're going to go ship some tin cans there and live inside of our tin cans for the rest of our lives and slowly you take a pickaxe and mine the soil and build more complicated things, this is not the way that you're going to settle Mars. The way you're going to do it is you're going to send up self-replicating machines. They go replicate and make more and more and more of themselves. They build entire cities, maybe even cover the planet with cities, and then you send people to just move in. So we don't go and live in squalor and then die from radiation. We go and move into palaces in a paradise and have the machines build it first. That is the key to colonizing Mars.
Okay, so obviously there has to be a source of energy to power all of this. We're going to send robots initially. The robots will presumably create, when we say self-replicating machines, what we're really saying is robots get sent to Mars, robots then build factories for building robots.
Well, that's one piece. There's 5 pieces to the puzzle. That's
Okay.
one of them.
Okay.
So what you need to do is have a closed loop. To get a closed loop, you need to have robots doing the mining, like the Boring Company. I've noticed a theme to all the companies Elon starts. But you have to have the robots doing the mining underground. That's convenient. We'll build underground later. Then they have to do the refining, take all those ores and get the metals out of them and get the chemicals that you need and do big chemical reaction vats. And
They're doing the mining and doing the refining,
Yes.
so they have the raw materials
yes.
to build more robots.
And then there's the robot factories.
Got it.
They build more robots and they build everything else they need, all the equipment that they need, and everything we need eventually. But to start off with is that. And then there is transportation. You need to move things around in order to have the whole civilization. So it's not like there's a robot that has a baby robot. It's like you have an entire civilization of robots that build an entire civilization of robots. And then the 5th thing is maintenance. You have to have robots able to go fix complicated machines. And you have to be able to do all of this almost entirely on your own. You can get words from Earth, but it can be 45 minutes away for light to go. It's an hour and a half round trip. Okay, an hour and a half means you can tell it every day what your job is, but you can't tell it, now pick up that screw and use the screwdriver. You can't tell it that.
Right, right. Okay, so is this going to be on the surface of the planet or is it actually going to be underground?
It has to be underground. So here's the problem. On Mars, there is no magnetic field, which protects us from cosmic rays and various radiation and things. And there's almost no atmosphere. Everybody knows Mars has an atmosphere of CO2. If you had a jar on Earth with the Martian atmosphere inside of it, you would say it has a vacuum in it. It is so thin. It is very, very thin. So on Mars, we have a very thin atmosphere that doesn't stop very much from outer space coming down and hurting you. And we don't have a magnetic field to prevent stuff from outer space coming down and hurting you. So if you sit on the surface and you just live in a tin can on the surface, you will die of radiation poisoning.
Got it.
You gotta live underground. Now, it doesn't have to be super deep. A couple meters is fine, but you have to be underground. But
that's true for biological systems.
Yeah, robots can live on top.
Sure.
But they don't need to. They can live underground too. Because they have to start with mining, but mining is something like the Boring Company's machine. You could just do strip mining, or you could go down and dig tunnels and do your mining that way, and then live in the tunnels, and then hollow out big caverns down there and mine in that. You could do all of that. You could live in lava tubes too, also, but it's probably easier just to build your own holes in the ground.
Got it. Okay. So again, where's the energy going to come from to do all this work?
Okay, so the obvious answer is initially you try to use solar. Solar is not all that great. Yeah. It's farther from the sun.
Right.
And there's dust that's going to get on it, and you can try to make it clean itself, but it's really hard to do. we'll use solar if we have to, but for a real industrial civilization, you need something better. There are no fossil fuels, so that means fission. You're going to need nuclear power. Does Mars have a lot of uranium and thorium and other things? Probably. There's no reason to think it doesn't, but we haven't actually discovered it, so we have to go dig and try to find all that stuff. I would see that as one of the very critical materials when we first get there. In fact, a lot of the pounds of what we send initially, kilograms, is going to have to be uranium, I think.
You have to have enough raw materials there in order to find the raw materials that are going to be needed.
True. And if all you want is carbon and iron, well, we can probably find that very fast. But if you also need uranium, it may take longer to find that. And so I think someone asked me once about writing a science fiction story on Mars, and I said, one of the things you might have them all fighting over is energy, because maybe when they discover that uranium is very rare, and then that's the key thing you need, the bottleneck of civilization. But I expect probably it's not all that rare. You can probably find uranium, but we haven't tried yet. So that'll be really important. Unless we get fusion, we should do one of these things, these first principles on energy. It is possible that we will see fusion actually become practical. And if that happens, and if Martian water has a little bit of deuterium in it, which it almost certainly does, then we're set. We have endless energy, and the robots can build these reactors easily, and we'll be fine. But that's still a question. We should have another one on energy.
There have been some interesting experiments recently on that.
Really interesting. This 2024, which could be a really interesting year in fusion. But we'll see. But failing that, we use uranium, we ship it from Earth originally, and then eventually we mine it locally. Okay.
And so then to just summarize, we send the robots with an initial payload so that they can do the work they need to do to find other raw materials, mine other raw materials. They then end up building the cities, and then we just show up and move in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So at some point late in the game, we send them seeds, and then they can have gardens, and you can have farms. Maybe we send them bacteria. Solar Foods is doing interesting things with food from bacteria. It's fascinating. So anyway, we have that, and then they can also we could send livestock as well, and they could have herds also if you wanted to do that, or lab-grown meat. We could do that too, all that stuff. But that's at the last step. The first step is just robots building more robots. That's really what we have to start with. Same thing on the moon. We shouldn't be sending people to the moon right now. We should be sending robots that build robots. This is what we need to start with.
So what are the missing pieces? What are the hard parts to make this happen?
Okay. Low cost to orbit is not actually critical to this whole thing. Elon has made the cost to orbit far lower than it used to be, and I think it's going to get far lower still. That's absolutely good and helps us get to Mars, but we could do it without it. Because all you have to do is send a seed to Mars, the minimum number of robots that can build more robots. So you don't have to send a whole lot, and we could have done it before, but now it's even easier because it's cheap. What we do need, though, is the robots.
The robots that can self-replicate.
They can self-replicate. And again, it's not a robot makes a robot. It's a robotic miner and refiner and factory and car and maintenance droid. All of those as a group are able to build more of all of those as a group.
Right. And so this is an area where Elon is going to be leading the pack.
I think so.
Yeah.
We'll see. But I am so excited about the Tesla bot.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it isn't SpaceX that has really made Mars accessible. It's going to be the Tesla bot that really makes Mars accessible. And then the Boring Company machines will be part of it, and SpaceX will be part of it too. And Starlink will be part of it. Actually, everything he's doing.
Sort of like a master plan.
Yeah, it's like a master plan. Right? They actually know what's going on. But of all of them, we could live without all of them except the Tesla bot or some kind of robot. We've got to have robots, and they've got to be able to repair complex machinery mostly on their own. They can't have an hour-and-a-half round-trip conversation. So they're going to have to be smart enough to fix complicated machines. Mm-hmm. But we're getting there. We will get there. And our current mining industry is going automated already. People are working really hard to make the mining industry automated. And then the manufacturing industry is going more and more automated. 3D printers are a big deal. People are 3D printing rockets and all sorts of things. And Elon's about to have the Tesla bot, and its first job will be factory worker.
Yeah.
And then we have transportation. Well, Tesla's working on that too. And then we have refineries, which is really just another kind of factory. And then you have maintenance, which is going to be the hardest part, but we'll get there. Mm-hmm. That's the big critical thing that we need. But we also need energy. And that's also the second big thing that we'll need.
Right. So, okay, we have robots. The robots, if we think about what's hard about robots, it's not necessarily the body, the actuators, but the brain that's going to need to drive them. The brain necessarily is going to be a computer, which means chips. So are we going to need a chip fab on Mars?
Yes, and I think that's going to be the very hard part of self-replication. A chip fab is probably the hardest part of all this to build. You can make do with machines that aren't all that good. Turns out creating a CNC machine to mill other metal is not all that hard. You can do that. The closing the loop is pretty easy for everything. Probably the chip fabs are the hardest part. They're multi-billion dollars right now, and you'll probably start with chips that aren't very sophisticated. But if you're going to have self-replicating robots, or a set of self-replicating robots, you've got to be able to build the chips. So the chip fab I see as the hardest part. Traditional 3D printing doesn't help, but we'll get there. But that is going to be the hardest part, I think.
But I assume that because chips are so tiny,
we can send a whole bunch of them to start with.
We can send a whole bunch of chips to start with.
And because uranium is so energetic, we can send a whole bunch of uranium to begin with. The good news is that the hard things I said was uranium and chips. Those are tiny. We can send a whole bunch of them initially.
Right.
But we want to close the loop. We've got to close the loop on those two. We've got to be able to mine our uranium or use fusion, and we've got to be able to build our own chips.
Okay. So those are sort of the foundational elements. Is there anything else missing?
Yeah, so we should talk about what elements are available. On Mars, you want to say, is there water? Yes! There's enough to cover the entire planet 10 meters deep if you were to melt it. There's tons of water at the poles, and now they're discovering there's even water other places that isn't even the poles. Below the surface looks like there's water all over the place. Mars has a lot of water. That makes it extremely easy to colonize, as opposed to the Moon or Venus. That's the hardest part about Venus is water, not temperature, water. So Mars has plenty of water. And if we get fusion working, that water probably has deuterium. We probably are set for that too. Okay.
Okay.
So we've got to have water. Then you have to have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur. These are the elements of life. Well, the atmosphere is CO2, carbon and oxygen. And water is hydrogen and oxygen. Great. There is nitrogen there. It is plentiful. And there is phosphorus and sulfur. And those are all good. And then if you're interested in a civilization of robots, we also have iron and aluminum, and probably there's uranium, though I don't know that we have a lot, but there probably is. I'd be surprised if there wasn't. In other words, it has all the elements that we need, and it has tons of the elements that we really need, which is water and oxygen and so on.
So, okay, if it has all of these foundational or fundamental elements,
yep.
In the end, do you think it's going to be possible to sort of turn Mars into a new Earth?
No, that's the problem. So terraforming sounds like a great next step, right? You build your underground cities covering the entire planet. By the way, you aren't limited to land as opposed to ocean because it's all land. So you have the whole planet. The surface of Mars, even though it's a small planet, is about the same as the surface of the Earth if you leave out the ocean.
But it still has enough water to cover the surface of Mars.
Yeah, it could be an ocean if you wanted to, but it's too cold.
Yeah. Okay.
There's the problem.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
It's too cold because it has no atmosphere.
And it's farther from the sun.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's give it an atmosphere. We'll crash lots of comets into it and waste all of those volatiles that are going to be so valuable when we are a space-faring civilization. But let's pretend that we want to waste them all, and we crash them all into Mars, and we give it an atmosphere, and we give it lots of greenhouse gases so that it can survive being far from the sun. Would that work? No. Because it doesn't have a magnetic field. And you can't create a magnetic field. It comes from the core spinning. They don't have a spinning core, so what do you do? And people have said, well, maybe we could just make like a moon that has a big magnetic field that protects it from the sun. I don't know. Probably hard. And that magnetic field is needed to stop the solar wind from taking away your atmosphere. Over time, it'll take away all your atmosphere. You'll lose it all. And the oxygen will react with the rocks, and you'll lose your oxygen. So you can't breathe, and then eventually you have nothing to breathe in. Okay, that's a problem. Plus, once we have this spanning the entire planet with cities, crashing comets into it is not really a good thing. And when we have a civilization filling the solar system with space-based habitats, people are going to want that water. Plus, you can turn that water into rocket fuel. There's a lot of uses for that water. You really don't want to waste it on Mars. And Mars has its own water. Why would you want to deal with that?
Right.
So these volatiles we're going to use elsewhere. I don't think we're going to use them on Mars. And all those cities, the people living in them, are going to let you do it. So the main problem you can't terraform Mars is because the Martians won't let you. I think that the people there are not going to want you crashing things into their planet. And you could even imagine, if we get advanced nanotech, having exoskeletons that start to make us able to walk around on the surface and have the ability to repair internal damage from radiation. We may just change ourselves to live on the surface of Mars. This is possible. So then why would you terraform it? We don't want to make it more like Earth, we want to make it more like Mars.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So Martians are going to adopt their own identity based on...
Well, that'll happen anyway.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so how long did it take for the English colonies to start saying, no, we're America, we're our own country?
Yeah.
Okay, that will certainly happen. You will end up being separate, and they will view themselves as separate from any country here. It'll be a separate country. Of course, they will refer to themselves as Martians, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I don't think the Martians are going to go into terraforming. Oh, it also takes hundreds of years, which,
So
anyway.
who knows? Yeah.
Well, no, but
likely.
I mean, it's a long process, and the process is painful, and you're crashing things into their planet,
Yeah. So,
and it's not very
and
nice.
they'll adapt.
And they'll adapt, yes. But we'll start with an underground city spanning the planet.
Okay. So let me just ask then. It sounds like this is sort of inevitable. I mean, the human race is going to want to do this. Are there any reasons not to do this?
So that's the funny thing. People have always said it's too expensive. What's the payoff? Well, it's not going to be expensive. If you just send robots that self-replicate, then it's very little expense. And certainly there are billionaires like Elon that can do that once we have the robots. And it looks like we are very close to the robots. So we talked about AI, and I said I don't know how far AI can go.
Yeah.
You don't need to go very far to have self-replicating robots. You don't have to have AGI, whatever that means. What we have right now, the things that we've already demonstrated, we just have to kind of polish it, and it should be enough to do what we need. Mm-hmm. Plus, we can tell it every 45 minutes what to be doing. We can actually run their whole civilization for them. We don't have to have it be entirely autonomous, although that'll come too. And then we'll reach the other stars and we'll colonize the galaxy. But we won't. Our children will be grown on other planets. We won't send people to other planets. But that doesn't matter.
Our children will be grown on other planets. Explain that.
Yeah, if you want to go to other stars, it takes too long to get there. You don't want to freeze yourself because radiation is going to kill you. What you really want to do is have a computer that's very resilient to radiation, that has inside of itself the DNA and all the culture of humanity to help raise the children, and then you just create children on other planets. You don't send them. And before that, you could just send self-replicating robots, the same one we talked about, to other planets. So this is the future. We probably need nanotech for that. We should do
That's
one
where
of
I was going next. That's where I was going next.
Okay.
All right. So how does
that.
nanotech... First off, what is nanotech, and then how does it relate to this?
So self-replicating robots is the key, but if you make your self-replicating robots really little, that's nanotech.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get there eventually too. But we don't need that for Mars, and we don't need AGI for Mars. We are right on the verge of all the things we need for Mars.
So we've talked a lot about Mars. Mars is in the public discourse and public psyche. Where else should or could we go in the relative short term, or even in the same term, perhaps, as we might go to Mars?
So we should go to the moon because it's close. The moon has all the elements you want, except it doesn't have hydrogen, which means it doesn't have water. There's a little bit of water at the poles, not nearly enough. So when we colonize the moon, we can have our self-replicating robots. They can do without hydrogen. They don't need water. But if you want to make rocket fuel to blast off, you need to have water. You really want water. And so that will then spur us to send robots to various comets and maybe even ice moons of Saturn and Jupiter and so on, and get water for the moon. So that will sort of start our civilization going out and getting water. You don't want to ship it from Earth. Even with the cheap robots that Elon's given us, you don't want to ship from Earth. It's too expensive.
Right.
It actually would be cheaper to ship it from Mars. Maybe Mars will ship water to the moon before we get around to mining the comets. Okay. So the moon is a good place because it's close, right? It's a second and a half, so it's only three seconds round trip.
What you're saying is the moon is not a good place to stage expeditions to Mars.
Oh, no. That doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
It's better just go direct.
Yeah, just go direct. Or maybe you build something in low Earth orbit and then you go from there.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's no particular reason to go to the moon. I wouldn't go to the moon. Right. I would just go to Mars and then get everything in situ resource utilization, ISRU. That's what I would do. But I would go to the moon because it's close and it gives us practice, and our robots are only 3 seconds round trip rather than an hour and a half sometimes round trip. That would be helpful. Also, when Mars is on the wrong side of the sun and hidden by the sun, that makes things even more difficult. You have to relay through something. Anyway, we should go to the moon. And then maybe we should go to the planet that's the most like Earth. It has Earth temperature, Earth air pressure. It is the most Earth-like spot in the solar system outside of the Earth. Where is that?
I don't know. Where is it?
Venus.
Venus.
Yes. The surface of Venus is so hot it melts lead. Go 20 miles up. And then it's Earth pressure, Earth temperature, and has all the elements of life that you need, just floating in the atmosphere 20 miles up. In fact, if you make a nice thin balloon, you fill it with Earth air, it will float in the atmosphere. You live inside your balloon. You don't use helium balloons, you use Earth air balloons, and you live inside of them. And you just have a whole civilization floating 20 miles up in Venus. The only problem is that hydrogen is very rare. It's a shortage of water.
Right.
And again, I think you're going to end up having to import water from the comets or maybe Mars or somewhere. Water is a real problem, which means that the next best place to go is some of the moons of Saturn and Jupiter that have water, and then you can go live under the ice and you can enjoy those. And so enjoy Europa, enjoy Encephalus, whatever the name of that place is. It starts with an E. Amazing, I forgot it. Go to those places, and they have lots of water, or go mine them for water.
Okay, so all of this, of course, sounds and is very futuristic. But where are we in this process? How long do you think it will take before we can actually pursue something like this?
The real question is how long till we have smart robots, and they're going to be changing our society in this decade. I think the change is going to happen more suddenly than people are expecting. And these $100,000 robots will become $10,000 robots and then become $1,000 robots. You and I have talked about ideas that I have for how to build super cheap robots. I think that this is coming, and that the average home will be able to have a robot that does the cooking for you and some basic cleaning for you and maybe fixes your car when it breaks. How many homes would pay $1,000 for a robot like that? Okay, it's just, you can't imagine. This is coming very close. The mining industry is very much moving into autonomy. The driving industry is going into autonomy. We are this close to being able to have robots that can go to Mars and go to the moon and do this. And we should absolutely not be sending people to the moon right now. We should be sending mining robots and refining robots and manufacturing robots and repair robots. But we'll get there. We'll get there very soon. I suppose we'll have people on the moon, just like we have people in Antarctica right now, a little bit before then. But, okay, that's just PR.
So, I mean, we're going to see everything that would need to be done on Mars would first be done on Earth.
Yes.
Presumably.
Yes.
Right? So we're going to see the advance in AI and robotics to the point where we can sort of have dry runs, stage the process here on Earth in preparation for the actual expedition.
Even if we don't think about Mars, we're doing it anyway. We're going to be building automated factories. This is coming very, very soon. And automated mining, we're already far down that path. These are coming anyway, and automated refineries, which is another kind of factory. Automated cars, we are doing anyway, not because of Mars, just because we want to do it. And by the way, imagine what happens when you have fully automated mining. They are perfectly happy underwater, which means we've spent all of recorded history mining the land, and now we have the majority of the planet that suddenly opens up.
This is a really interesting point. If the majority of the planet is now available to us and it hasn't been before, does it eliminate the need to go to Mars in the short term?
Well, there's no need to go to Mars for resources. We're not going to send resources back.
So then why do we go to Mars?
Because it's there. And for people who don't understand that answer, it's not your answer. But for people who understand that answer, if we can send robots that cover Mars...
For the same reason we went to the moon.
That is also true. But there'll be more reasons. For Mars, once we have the seed, once we have the ability to send a seed, if you send a seed for $100 billion, absolutely it will happen. People send a seed for $100 billion, or for $1 billion, or for $0.1 billion, whatever it turns out to be. And then they self-replicate. They build cities under the ground, all over Mars. They build the parks and the farms and the livestock pins and the using bacteria to grow this stuff and maybe vat-grown meat, all that stuff. And then you ask people, would you like to go move into this paradise where you have everything you want and you have infinite land? Would you like to move in? All you have to do is get yourself from here to Mars. Okay, well, now the spaceship's fairly cheap and you have to go over there and the spaceship probably has to have a couple meters of water all the way around it to protect you from the radiation while you're going. But we can do that. We can spin things to give you gravity, or maybe we'll find drugs that help you survive in low gravity for a couple of years. We can do it. Oh, nuclear propulsion. You have to have nuclear propulsion to get there in a couple months, but we'll do it. And then you can ask, of the 8 billion people on Earth, who wants to go to Mars? Raise your hand. You'll get more than you need.
Yeah.
No question. Even if you spend the rest of your life there, which you probably will.
So I would assume that all of the motivating factors for exploring the new world apply here. The same motivations will be there for Mars ultimately.
Almost. The exploration from Europe of the North and South America was a lot about resource extraction, shipping it back home. You have none of that.
Yeah.
We have our own robots. We can mine stuff here.
But
We
there
don't have
have
to go
to
to
be
Mars.
economic reasons for wanting to go to Mars.
Not really. There really aren't.
Well, that's
There
a
really
pretty
aren't.
big deal. If there are no economic...
No.
Okay. Then other reasons.
The other
Persecution.
The other reason, people want to do it. And if you make it easy, people will do it. And then the Martians will reproduce and cover Mars. It's not going to be shipping 1 billion people from Earth to Mars. They'll grow their own billions. People like to grow people. It works well.
Yeah.
Yes. And so...
And people like to get away from people.
And this is also true. So that was one of the reasons some people went to the New World to get away from the Old World.
Right.
That is a strong motivation.
Right.
Yes. And so they went to the New World, which already had people before the new people came, but that didn't always work out well. But people want to go to Mars to get away from things here, or people want to go to Mars because there you can have 1,000 square kilometers that belongs to you by yourself. Hey, that'd be really cool. I can't have that on Earth. And let's go to the bottom of the ocean, which will also happen. So I think people want to go to Mars for those reasons, just because it's there, because it's exciting. It's science fiction-y. It gives you maybe really good resources for yourself until a lot of other people show up, or until you reproduce and create a whole bunch of other people. And you have all these robots making life wonderful for you, making life wonderful here too. We'll see the same thing on the moon, maybe Venus. We import water. We do in Venus. Nanotech makes Venus easier because you get chemicals from the atmosphere more easily. The moons, and then space colonies. I think we will see space colonies. But the Mars is where we start.
Okay. All right, so there you have it. That was fun. Look forward to the next one. Any final thoughts before we quit?
I've got to ask you, would you go live a few weeks on the moon, or would you go spend a year on Mars?
If I was certain to be able to get home, I would go. If I knew I was going to return, yes, I would go.
Okay. So maybe a 2-year trip on Mars, guaranteed we can get you back home.
Even 2 years. I just need to know I can come back.
I think we could do that. Yes. Yeah. Yes. And for the moon, you could just take a few days to get there and stay for a week and come back.
Yeah.
Orbit would be fun too. I'd really like to go into orbit. That'd be really cool.
That's coming pretty quickly.
Orbital hotels, people are talking about it right now. Yeah. And now that Elon has made access to orbit cheap, and it's getting even more cheap, I love the Starship is really cool. Super heavy. Yeah, it's really cool. So we are this close to it, and the AI that we talked about earlier is the foundation. Cheap access to orbit is nice, but it isn't needed. AI is what you need, and we are so close, and Tesla Bot may actually be the thing that pushes us over the edge into being able to colonize Mars. And I think we're going to do it.
Yeah. All right. That's way cool.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next First Principles.
Yep. We'll see you then. Thanks.